Now, these figures, statistics, are familiar to many of you. Over the past 4 decades, today the growth rate has slowed down. So this year we are thinking of 6.5%. But even with 6.5%, the extra GDP from this 6.5% means China can produce one United Kingdom in terms of GDP every 2 years, which means $2.8 trillion US dollars. So it means a lot for China, for the West, for the world. And then what's more important is poverty eradication. By World Bank standards, China eradicated poverty, lifted 850 million people out of poverty. By China's own standards, 730 million people, because our standards are a bit higher than World Bank standards. And I read about this new economics laureate, Nobel Prize, goes to economists working on poverty eradication. I haven't got more information about details of these economists, but definitely China's performance, if the theory is with the West, the performance, the practice, most successful practice really has been conducted in China. It has changed life for so many Chinese. China today has the world's largest middle class. Again, by World Bank standards, it's 400 million, more than the United States population. And this real middle class, even by UK standards, by European standards, by American standards, people with properties, with decent income. Again, this is changing the landscape of the world. And what's more important, China also exports more tourists than any other countries, than many countries combined. 850 million visits made every year. And again, this is also important. This old one, the latest one I checked yesterday morning about whether your country is on the right track. And Ipsos has made this kind of surveys, I think since 5 or 6 years ago. Every year they produce one report. In the case of China, it maintains at level of roughly 90%. For this year, it's 91%. And for United States, 41%. And for the UK, I'm sorry, it's 21%. And for France, it's 20%. Yeah. So by this measurement, it's also, you could find similar sample surveys and similar results from other surveys, internationally credible institutions. It's also, that's why I said this to my audience at Oxford yesterday. I said, if you look at Western media, it's always the human rights, Tibet, Xinjiang. But don't forget, if you have to ask Chinese, most Chinese, how they feel about their human rights. It's so common sense, part of general knowledge. Most people think their country is the best time of their history. No doubt about this. Otherwise, I said, we send 100 million tourists abroad, 99.999% return back to China. How they come to return to a country without human rights, or human rights are deteriorating? It's against common sense. The opposite is true. We have our problems, but I said the Western media, BBC included, should have the courage to tell the truth to the British, the Western audience. Most Chinese feel good about their country, not the other way around. This is common sense. Your reporting could be accurate, but you have to present this overall picture. Otherwise, in the eyes of most Chinese, it's, how should I put it? It's fake news. Yeah. And yes, I even cracked the joke, which is based on serious study. I said, I encountered actually UN Secretary General. He asked me, he said, Weiwei, what kind of English literature is more reliable that we can read and understand China? I said, with all my knowledge, I'm afraid, for the official publications in English from Chinese government, from Chinese institutions, to be honest, I don't think their quality is high enough. But I said, read The Economist. But I have another line. I said, understand Economist articles in a reverse way. If it's not good, actually it's very good. And why I said that, to be fair with The Economist, it's a good journal, I read every issue. its political comments on China is of poor quality. I would give it a rating of C minus. Yeah. Its other comments could make a lot of sense, but on political affairs, because one of the senior fellows of my institute made a study, he checked, because whenever Chinese Communist Party holds a national congress, economists will issue editorial. So he did a study of the 7 editorials from 12th Party Congress to the 19th. He came with this conclusion: you have to understand this. You have to understand this in a reverse way. If it's not good, very good. It's good, not good. So, for your reference, it's humorous. On the other hand, it tells a lot. How to understand China, at least feel the pulse of the society. It's changing so fast. You know, if you read Western media, China cannot be a success because without human rights, without political reform, but China is rising. Yeah. And China cannot be an innovative country because suppression of freedom of speech, etc. But China is one of the most innovative countries, society in the world. A lot of innovation all the time. So these are for your reference.
I've been going to China now for 30 years, and the one thing that has worried me has been the fact that you say you're a socialist country and there should be a smaller difference in wealth across the nation. But I must say I've got the impression more recently that the discrepancy between the countryside and the developed city side has widened, not narrowed. Is that a misreading of the situation?
No, actually, if you look at past 10 years, indeed, at the very beginning of reform, see if we look at past 4 decades as a whole, in the first 3 decades, the gap between rich and poor has widened, between countryside and cities have widened. But I must say, add this sentence, that is, yes, they are widened, but the poor's situation has become much better than before. So it's a relative deprivation, not absolute deprivation. Yeah. Over the past 10 years, we give this credit to Xi Jinping. He began to emphasize more balance between regions and between rich and poor. So over the past 10 years, the interior part of China has seen much faster growth rate, than ever before. Last year, the fastest growth region is Xinjiang, over 10% GDP growth rate. So this gap is indeed becoming smaller. But China is a huge country, you know, because in the Western social science, people often use this Gini coefficient to see the income gap. I'm not very sure that will be appropriate for a country the size of China. Because if you calculate, say, the income difference between Tibet and Shanghai, the richest province and the poorest province, then you see, the gap is huge. But if you measure, even with the Gini coefficient, you look at within within Shanghai, within Jiangsu province, or within Tibet autonomous region, then Gini ratio is narrowing. It's manageable. It's not at level of crisis. It's a super large country, so I think it's fair to make some more detailed, more concrete analysis. But on the whole, most people feel this gap is narrowing down. And even you go to western part of China, go to Urumqi, go to Ningxia, and they are not very modern, I must tell you. I was back in Ningxia, which is one of the poorest provinces in China, together with, it's called the Belt and Road and Arab countries. We have the international forum. They can't believe it's one of China's poorest provinces. It looks very modern. Yeah.